Boxing Day had always been uneventful for me, a calm respite after the festivities of Christmas. But this year, something felt ominously different. The streets outside were blanketed in snow, eerily silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. My tiny apartment, normally cozy, felt colder than usual, the flickering Christmas lights casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. The knock came just as I was sipping on my coffee, startling me so badly I nearly dropped the mug. It wasn't a strong knock, just a faint tap, but in the quiet of the evening, it was jarring. I froze, my heart thudding. No one ever came to my door unannounced, especially not on Boxing Day. I crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Still, when I opened the door, I found it. A plain, unmarked brown box sitting on my doorstep. My name was scrawled on the top in messy, hurried handwriting, the ink smudged as though written in a freezing cold. I picked it up, my hands shaking slightly, and brought it inside. It was unnervingly light, almost as if it were empty. The room seemed to grow colder as I set it down on the table. For a moment, I simply stared at it, unease growing in the pit of my stomach. When I finally opened it, the lid slid off effortlessly, revealing nothing inside except a black envelope. The words "Do not open" were etched on its surface in jagged blood-red ink. My breath hitched. The air felt heavier, and I could swear the lights dimmed for a moment. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. It showed a small cabin in the middle of the woods, its windows glowing faintly with an unnatural light. On the back, a message was scrawled in the same jagged handwriting. "Return what isn't yours, or the box will take you." The room suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in as an unnatural chill seeped through the air. The lights flickered violently, and then the power went out completely, plunging the apartment into darkness. A whisper broke the silence. "You've made a mistake." The voice was faint but unmistakable, as if someone were standing right behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The room felt alive, shadows twisting and moving as if they were watching me. Then my phone buzzed, shattering the oppressive quiet. I snatched it up, desperate for any human connection. But the screen didn't display a number. Instead, the words, "Midnight." The woods glowed faintly on the screen before it went dead. I told myself it was a prank, but the photograph, the whispers, the box, all of it felt too real. As the minutes ticked closer to midnight, the unease in my chest grew unbearable. By 11:45, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment, the box still sitting on the table like an ominous relic. The streets were deserted, the snow crunching beneath my boots the only sound. The forest loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, its skeletal trees clawing at the moonlit sky. I hesitated at the edge, my breath fogging in the freezing air. A sudden gust of wind seemed to push me forward, and I found myself walking into the woods, as if drawn by an unseen force. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping and echoing in the cold night. "You shouldn't have opened it. The box sees all. December always claims its debt." The cabin appeared suddenly, as if conjured by the darkness. It was exactly like the photograph, its faintly glowing windows exuding an eerie light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The air around it felt charged, heavy with an invisible threat. Inside, the cabin was freezing, the air thick with the scent of decay and something metallic. The walls were covered in scratches, names etched into the wood with jagged, desperate strokes. Hundreds of names, each one crossed out with thick black lines. In the center of the room sat another box, identical to the one I had received. The moment I saw it, the whispers grew deafening, a chaotic chorus of voices screaming incomprehensible words. My knees buckled, and I clutched my head, trying to block out the noise. Then, as suddenly as they started, the whispers stopped. The room fell silent, but the oppressive weight of the cabin remained. The box seemed to call to me, its presence almost magnetic. My hands moved on their own, reaching for the lid. "No," a voice hissed,
No!
loud and sharp.
No!
It wasn't a
No!
whisper this time. It was clear and commanding. I froze, my hands hovering above the box. The shadows in the room began to twist and writhe, forming a figure, tall, cloaked in darkness, with hollow, glowing eyes. It pointed a skeletal finger at me, its voice a guttural growl that shook the walls. "You opened what was not yours. Now you must return the debt." Terrified, I stammered, "I didn't know. Please, tell me how to fix this." The figure loomed closer, its hollow eyes burning into mine. "Return the box to where it belongs," it said. "But the path will not spare you." Before I could respond, the shadows engulfed me. I felt myself being pulled, the air around me warping and twisting until I found myself standing in a clearing, the box clutched in my hands. The cabin was gone, replaced by a gnarled, ancient tree with roots that seemed to claw at the frozen earth. A faint, rhythmic pounding echoed from beneath the ground, like a heartbeat. The whispers returned, guiding me toward the base of the tree. I placed the box on the frozen ground, my fingers numbed from the cold. The earth began to tremble, and the box sank slowly into the soil, disappearing completely. The pounding stopped. The air grew still. Back in my apartment, everything seemed normal again. The lights were steady, the room warm, and the photograph was gone. But as I looked into the mirror, something was different. My reflection stared back at me, but its eyes were wrong. Darker, emptier, filled with the faint glow of the cabin's windows. The whispers were faint now, but I could still hear them, a chilling reminder of what I had unleashed. Some debts can be repaid, but the scars they leave behind are eternal. Boxing Day was always a time to relax, unwind, and process the holiday chaos. But for me, this Boxing Day was anything but ordinary. The clock struck midnight, and the snow outside continued to fall, creating a quiet, almost haunting scene through my window. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the world was waiting for something to happen. I had just finished cleaning up after the Christmas festivities, when a faint knock at the door broke the silence. It was odd. Who would be out here in this weather on Boxing Day? I opened the door cautiously, expecting to find no one. But there it was, a small, unmarked package sitting at my doorstep. The snow had already started to cover it, but there was no mistaking it. I bent down and picked it up, feeling the cold cardboard against my skin. No return address, no note, just my name, written in sloppy, jagged handwriting on the front. An unsettling feeling crept over me as I took it inside, placing it on the table. The box was oddly light, almost empty. I hesitated for a moment, then tore it open. Inside, I found a single piece of paper, folded neatly in half. The handwriting on the paper was the same as on the box, crude and rushed. It read, "Your mistake is already in motion. You have until sunrise to fix it." My heart began to race. I scanned the room, feeling a cold draft that seemed to come from nowhere. Something was terribly wrong. My mind screamed for me to ignore the note, to simply discard it, but the weight of those words held me captive. A sudden knock echoed through the apartment, louder than before. I froze. There was no way anyone could be at the door. No one could have arrived so quickly. I glanced at the clock. It was 12:10 a.m. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Slowly, I approached the door, my hand shaking as I turned the handle. When I opened it, no one was there. But just as before, there was another box sitting on the doorstep. This time, it was slightly bigger. My pulse quickened as I reached down to pick it up, the feeling of dread growing with every passing second. Inside, the same note, the same rushed handwriting. "Time is running out. You can still stop it." I slammed the door shut and backed away, my breath shallow. A cold sweat dripped down my back. What did it mean? What mistake had I made? The knocks kept coming, each one more urgent than the last, until my whole apartment seemed to reverberate with them. The clock on the wall ticked louder, the seconds slipping away. With each knock, my anxiety deepened, and the temperature dropped. I felt as though the air itself was closing in on me. The whispers in the darkness seemed to grow louder, as if they were coming from all sides. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and everything went dark. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. But when I checked the time, it was 3:00 a.m. The calendar on my phone displayed the date, Boxing Day, yet something was wrong. I had lost track of time. The knocks had stopped, but the silence that followed felt suffocating. As I moved cautiously around the apartment, I heard a faint sound, like a soft, scraping noise. I turned toward the door, but it wasn't the door making the sound. It was the walls. The apartment seemed to be shifting, warping, as if the very foundation was cracking under some unseen force. I backed away, heart pounding, my breath coming in short bursts. The whispers returned, louder than ever, swirling around me like a storm. Then the phone buzzed. A new message appeared. The message read, "Come to the woods. You know the way." I stood frozen, unable to make sense of it. The woods? I had never been to the woods at this hour, certainly not in this state of mind. But something deep within me, the same force that had compelled me to open the first box, urged me to go. Before I could make a decision, the phone died, and the apartment fell into a deeper darkness. The weight in the air grew unbearable, and I felt like something was watching me. The feeling of being chased, of running from an invisible threat, made my limbs tremble. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my coat, shoved my shoes on, and rushed outside into the biting cold. The wind howled through the streets, and the snow seemed to swirl in strange patterns, guiding me in one direction: the path toward the woods. The woods looked even more ominous under the pale light of the moon. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their bare branches creaking in the wind like skeletal hands reaching out for me. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I could feel the temperature dropping even further. My breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Suddenly, the ground beneath me seemed to shift, and I stumbled, almost falling. The next thing I saw was a small, dilapidated cabin standing in the middle of the woods. Its windows glowed with an unnatural, flickering light, just like the ones from the picture in the first box. I approached it slowly, the eerie glow growing brighter as I stepped closer. The door creaked open as if inviting me in. A sense of dread washed over me, but I stepped inside anyway. Inside, the cabin was freezing. The walls were lined with strange symbols, some of which seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. On the table, there was a box, identical to the ones I had received earlier. I approached it, and as soon as my fingers touched the lid, the room seemed to collapse in on itself. The temperature plummeted, and I could feel the presence of something otherworldly standing behind me. The whispers became deafening. The walls began to close in. I couldn't breathe. Suddenly, I heard the voice, a low, gravelly growl. "You shouldn't have come. The price has already been paid." I turned around to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, with glowing red eyes. The figure's voice boomed in my mind, its words sharp like daggers. "You opened the box. Now you must stay. The woods are hungry for souls." Before I could react, the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell into the darkness. The next morning, when the sun finally rose, the town was eerily quiet. The snow had stopped falling, but something had changed. The woods felt closer. The cold air felt suffocating, as if it were holding its breath. No one ever found me. The cabin was gone, and the trail leading into the woods vanished. But every Boxing Day, when the clock strikes midnight, the knocking starts again. And I know it's only a matter of time before the box finds its way back to me. The whispers have already begun, and I can never escape them. It was the final night of the year. The clock was ticking toward midnight, and the excitement of the approaching new year was palpable in the streets below. But in my apartment, a heavy silence hung in the air. There was an odd sense of foreboding that had been building inside me for days. The past week had been full of strange dreams, dark, disturbing visions of being trapped in a room with no way out. No matter how hard I tried to shake it off, the feeling lingered. I paced around my apartment, glancing nervously at the clock. Something was wrong. Every corner of the room felt colder, as if the walls themselves were pressing in on me. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was far too late for visitors. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. When I opened the door, I was met with darkness. There was no one there, but on the floor, right at my feet, lay a small wooden box. It was old, the wood worn and scratched as if it had been through countless hands. My curiosity got the better of me, and I bent down to pick it up. As soon as my fingers brushed against it, I felt a surge of energy, cold, sharp, like an electric shock that coursed through my body. Inside the box, there was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, reading the words that seemed to burn into my mind. The time has come. Your soul is mine if you cannot solve the puzzle before midnight. I'll be watching. The devil. My pulse raced. The letter felt cursed, the ink swirling as if it had a life of its own. There was no turning back now. The pressure was on, and with every passing minute, the weight of the situation grew heavier. Something deep within me urged me to solve the puzzle, to find a way out before it was too late. I could hear whispers around me, faint but growing louder. The air was thick, suffocating. I turned around, but there was no one there. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second, as if mocking my desperation. The walls seemed to close in, the temperature dropping with each breath I took. I was no longer alone. A shadow moved across the room, flickering like a flame in the wind. The devil. His presence was undeniable, his eyes glowing with an unnatural red light, burning through the darkness. He emerged from the shadows, a tall figure cloaked in black. His voice, when he spoke, was low and guttural. "You've made a deal with me, and now you must fulfill your end. Solve the puzzle, or your soul will be mine by dawn." My heart raced as I stared at him, my mind reeling. This wasn't just some sick joke. The devil was real, and he had come for me. The weight of his presence felt like it was crushing me, yet I couldn't look away. His smile was twisted, cruel, and I could feel the fear rising inside me. But I knew one thing. I couldn't give up. I had to find a way out. I turned my focus back to the box, desperate for any clue. But then, something strange happened. The puzzle's symbols began to shift and change before my eyes, but they weren't just random now. They seemed to form a new shape. A doorway, a dark archway that flickered with light. I blinked, unsure if it was just my mind playing tricks, but the doorway kept appearing and disappearing, urging me to focus. I reached out to touch the new symbol that had appeared, but as soon as my fingers made contact, a burst of static shot through the room. The devil's laughter echoed, this time more sinister, more haunting. The symbols had turned into an intricate maze, each piece twisting with malevolent energy. My vision blurred as the shadows grew darker, almost suffocating. Then, another twist. I felt a cold wind brush past me, and the room started to shift. The shadows seemed to crawl up the walls and across the ceiling. The lights flickered violently. I could see figures in the darkness now, twisted, contorted shapes, faces hidden in the shadows, watching me with hollow eyes. They were waiting for the devil's command. The air grew colder, and the whispers from before grew louder, more urgent. But just as I felt the pressure become unbearable, I noticed something strange. The symbols in the box had stopped moving. Everything around me had frozen. The devil's figure, the twisted faces, all of it had come to a standstill. Even the clock on the wall had paused. In that instant, I realized something crucial. The puzzle wasn't about solving it physically. It wasn't just a game. It was a test of my mind, of my strength to face the darkness within me. I had been so focused on the symbols, the external horror, that I had forgotten the most important truth. This was my own fear manifesting, my own weakness that I had to overcome. I took a deep breath and cleared my mind. The shadows began to recede. The figures in the room started to fade. And as I focused, the symbols aligned in a way that I couldn't explain, but I understood. It was the balance between light and darkness, between fear and courage, that held the key. I pressed the final symbol, the one that represented balance, and everything shifted. The devil's figure screamed in fury as the room began to disintegrate. The floor cracked open beneath me, but I stood firm. The clock ticked once, then twice, and with the third chime, the room exploded in a burst of light. The darkness was gone, and the devil, his anger lingering in the air, vanished. As the light from the clock's chime illuminated the room, I saw a final note on the table where the box once lay. It was the devil's voice, distant and fading, warning me. "You've won this time, but the bargain is never over. I will be back, but now, you know how to fight me." The weight lifted from my chest. The terror I had felt all night evaporated like smoke. The city outside burst into celebration as the new year arrived. The fireworks exploded in the sky, but I wasn't afraid. I had faced the darkness, confronted my fear, and survived. The clock had struck midnight, and I had defeated the devil. But the lesson was clear. The battle never ends, and true strength comes from within. The new year was not just the beginning of a new chapter. It was the reminder that, no matter what came next, I was ready. The lesson in the story is that true strength lies within ourselves, and when we confront and overcome our fears and weaknesses, we are capable of conquering them. The devil's challenge wasn't just an external threat, but a test that pushed the protagonist to recognize their inner power and use it to solve problems. Life will always present new challenges, but by understanding our inner strength and facing those fears head-on, we have the power to overcome anything.
If you enjoyed this terrifying tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chilling story. Your support helps us create even more thrilling content, and we're so grateful to have you with us on this terrifying journey. Thanks for watching, and remember, once you subscribe, the nightmare never ends.